Good morning, gentlemen. On the eighth day, God looked down on his planned turnaround schedule and said, I need someone who can build this. So God made a welder. He needed someone who could work 12-hour shifts in the scorching sun, then pull another 4 just to make sure the job was done right. Someone who could take a pile of raw steel and turn it into something that would hold back fire, pressure, and time itself. Someone with hands steady enough to lay down a bead, smoother than a baby's backside, but calloused enough to handle red-hot slag without flinching. He needed a man who could work in heat so blistering it could melt the soles off his boots, and in cold so brutal it could freeze the breath right out of his lungs. A man who could strike an arc in a hurricane, weld a broken heart back together, and drink a case of beer without missing a minute of work the next day. He needed a man who could hold his own against pipe fitters, outwork the iron workers, and still find time to teach the young bucks how to do it right. Someone who didn't need GPS to find the job site because he'd built half of them himself. Someone who wasn't afraid of fire, fumes, or the foreman. So God made David Jones. Now, David wasn't just any welder. No, sir, he was the best welder in the northern hemisphere. His name carried weight from Houston to the North Sea. He had welded on the tallest towers, the deepest vessels, the hottest pipes. Inspectors passed his work before they even looked at it. Hell, some took pictures of his beads just so they could show their grandkids what perfection looked like. And well, David was also known for something else. He had a way with the ladies. The kind of charm that made the payroll lady forget his per diem was already paid. The kind of confidence that made every bar stool in every refinery town his throne. In fact, from his time up in Alaska along the North Slope, they say he left behind more than just some legendary wells. There's a whole generation of half Eskimo, half Salesby redneck babies living in igloos, wondering why they have such an unnatural talent for running a bead. Rugged little kids with dark hair and freckled faces, knocking icicles off their welding hoods, instinctively reaching for a rod like it was bred into their DNA. And if you ever find yourself in a dive bar outside Fairbanks and hear an old-timer mention Jones's Arctic dynasty, just know they ain't talking about an oil company. But even legends make mistakes. One day on a turnaround job just like this one, David climbed a scaffold. 10 feet, nothing major. A quick weld, one he'd done 1,000 times before. And because he was David Jones, world famous, lady charming, bead-laying royalty, he didn't tie off. Just for a minute, he thought, I'll be fine. Until he wasn't. Maybe the board shifted, maybe his boot slipped, maybe, just maybe, the rules finally caught up with him. And the thing about gravity, gentlemen, is that it doesn't care how good you are. David hit the ground hard, and for the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. No smooth comeback, no cocky grin, no joke about how he meant to do that. Just silence. And that was the part that shook everyone the most, because David Jones always had something to say. Whether it was a quick-witted remark, a story from a past job, or just filling the air with the sound of conversation, silence was never his style. But now he lay there, still and quiet, and that silence spread like a cold wind through the refinery. One by one, the grinders stopped, the torches went out, the radios crackled, then fell still. The whole job site, the place normally buzzing with steel and sweat and cussing, just stopped. Then the whispers started. You hear about Jones? David Jones? He fell. No way, Jones don't fall. He did today. By lunch, the news had left the refinery. By shift change, it had hit the next job site. By the next morning, every welder from the Gulf Coast to Alberta knew David Jones, the best in the business, had hit the ground. And if he could fall, so could anyone. He lived, but he never welded again, never climbed another scaffold. And when I saw him months later, after the surgeries, after the therapy, after the weight of it all settled in, he looked me in the eye and said, "I was in a hurry. I should have listened." Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That won't be me, and maybe it won't. But I'll tell you this. Every man who's ever hit the ground thought the same thing. So today, I'm not here to teach you anything new. I'm here to remind you, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good you are, how many years you've done this, or how many people know your name. The best welder in the world still has to go home at the end of the day. And now you know the rest of the story.